So I have the introduction here, and then I'm going to put in today. I'll probably put in something for the body paragraph and the conclusion. So the idea is basically for the introduction, you want to start broad and then move to narrow. And one of the things to do is for usually tell people the first two sentences is you're trying to make someone interested in your essay right away. So you're using what they call a hook. So these are different types of hooks is what this other document is. So this is in the discussion for the week 4. You could start with a story. What you want the hook to do, right, is cause someone to be curious about what you're going to talk about. So telling a story about somebody, you don't want this to be a story about yourself first. So you want to find a story in research, right, in some article about some person, and then you could tell their story. But stories are one of the best ways to get people interested, because it's like we can't not pay attention to a story. Well, like our human brains automatically follow it. So telling a story is a good way to do this. You could bring up the opposing position that you're about to argue against. Some people like that strategy. It's almost like it's a counter argument. So you bring up the other side. You're like, everybody thinks this. And then you'll end up being like, but actually, this is creating curiosity. This is somebody just using, you don't know what they're talking about till they get to what their main subject is, right? Like, it's taking over our lives. We can do it almost anywhere, and so on. And then you figure out, right, it's texting. That's the creating curiosity. So that's like a mystery sort of thing. Challenging a common belief. Historical examples also a little bit like telling a story, because it's from the past. So we're doing social media, right? A story from the beginnings of social media, who knows? Anyway, the whole point is that it brings up the subject in a very broad way, makes people interested in it, and then sort of gets you going into the rest of the introduction. The last idea is posing a question that you eventually will answer. So this is a question you don't want to actually ask the reader a question. You don't want to be like, so have you ever thought about da da da? You would rather try to think about is social media destroying society? Something like that. And then you can go, eventually, meaning you'll answer it, meaning you'll address it. That's all. So you want to take a look at those and decide, and based on whatever your research is, you want to have a hook. And then basically the introduction goes. So I think you start with a hook, and then you have this sort of general sort of background part where you need to start very broad, right? And so in our case, you're talking about social media, right? Very broadly. And then sort of sentence by sentence, you then move towards your thesis, and then you end with your thesis statement, right? And your thesis statement is the position that you're taking, or the stance. I guess last week's document, right? You did the stance, and the comments that I made to people and that I put on your assignments were just trying to help people make their thesis as strong as possible. If I thought it was too narrow, I said maybe you would need to broaden it, and I gave some suggestions. If it was too broad, I said maybe you would need to narrow it, and I gave some suggestions there. But in any event, that's the basic formula for the introduction. So the rest of these are basically what I just went over, except it's just from a different thing that I made. I made that sheet, then I made this. These are these are basically the and little topic. So it gives this paragraph where the first sentence, or two, depends, I guess, is the hook, right? And it's telling this little, actually, I guess I'd do the first one. And then it's giving some background. So it goes first, the first sentence is supposed to be the hook. Celebrating the revolution, French citizens sent King Louis XVI to the guillotine. You're like, all right, guillotines are cool, so then you would want to keep reading. And then it gives a little background about the history of corporal punishment, or not corporal, capital punishment, right? So every day in Halloween, ancient Rome. So it gives this little background. So it's giving a historical background, and then it's sort of mentioning a lot of people have issues with this subject about capital punishment, and then gets very specific and ends with our society should keep the death penalty to deter crime. So that's their position statement, right? So you got a hook, some background, like from very broad, and then getting closer, and then you end with your thesis. Yeah, so I even put the Halloween. I guess I included the second sentence as part of the hook. And then narrowing it, you start to move into where you're going to be talking about, and then there's the thesis. Right, so that's, and that's, oh yeah, things, what that was about. Okay.